Check 1, 2. Alright folks, just testing the stream right now. I'm going to jump in about 3 or 4 minutes or so, a little after 1 p.m. Central Time, so stay tuned. Alright folks, we're about 2 minutes away. I'm going to get started a little bit after 2 p.m. here, Eastern Time. Alright folks, I'm going to go ahead and get started. We've got a handful of people in here already. First things first, I haven't done one of these in a while, so if there's any audio issues, please let me know in the chat, which should be live. And if you have any questions that pop up as I do this, please also feel free to throw those into the chat as well, and I'll try to answer them as we get to them. So welcome. Today's live stream is about taking a Vectorworks file and a Sketchup model and importing those both into Capture, which is a visualization program that we use for prevising all of our shows in the theater world. When I say we, I mean my team and I. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Let me clear my screen here. Great. So what we're looking at first is our Vectorworks file of the show that we're going to be working on. So this is for an upcoming production of Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder at City Springs Theater in Atlanta. We've got about, actually I think it opens a month from tomorrow. So the plot is pretty much finalized at this point. We're adding a couple things here and there, but for the most part nothing major is going to change. So I feel comfortable to go ahead and import all of my stuff over into Capture. So the first thing we want to do is get this file all prepped and ready to go for previs. So I'm going to go ahead and go to some of my working layers here. My computer is not super happy with me today trying to do this stream and run Vectorworks 2020. Okay, oh, and we're sideways, of course. Let me rotate that around. Okay, so what we're looking at right now is the raw Vectorworks drawing of the entire venue, of all of the plot pieces, everything involved with the show. My team and I mostly draft all of our plots. Sorry, again, my computer is not happy today. There we go. Most of our Vectorworks stuff is all done in 2D, just for speed. You can see like all of my side light positions and things like that. These are all basically just flat objects. The lighting fixtures themselves have 3D geometry to them. If I come around here and start zooming around and hovering, you can see they all have a little bit of geometry to them, but they're all pretty much flat on the ground. You can see some of them are kind of out here in space already, the ones that are out at the front of house positions. So those front of house positions are already put in this file from previous shows that I've worked on in the space. So because they're a lighting position object within Vectorworks, anything I attach to those lighting positions will automatically jump to the Z value that those positions are at, if that makes any sense. So you can see I've got like a moving light here that's probably supposed to be on the balcony rail that's just hanging out in space. So we're going to fix that. We want to get all of our electrics and our apron truss up into the right 3D space. And then the real challenge of the whole shebang here is getting all of these side light things like the ladders and the booms put into three-dimensional space to be able to import them over into Capture. So the first thing I did before I did any of this, if you notice up here, my file name is Gentleman's Guide for Capture. So I've taken my Vectorworks file, I've made a copy of it, and I'm not touching my actual working file that everybody is using for the show. The other thing I did before this video, oops, let me bring this over into the right window here, is I went through and I made a list of heights for all of my things. So I've got my electric trim heights, I've got trims for all of... I just decided to quote that there's an echo on there. How bad is the echo? Is it really bad? Let me see here. Oh, I see why. It was sending the microphone into two different places. How is that? Is that any better? Of course, there's a delay, so I have to wait for people to answer. Great. So now I got to figure out why that's happening. Tell you what, I'm just going to switch to the built-in microphone that's on my iMac instead of trying to use my interface. Does this help at all, anybody? No, YouTube is not open. Great. Okay, so I'm going to move on from here. I know the audio quality might not be as great because I've got just my iMac speaker or my iMac microphone now. I'll turn the fan off in my room. Okay. So sum up what I've said so far in case you couldn't discern it. Basically, I've got this drawing. I've got all these lights kind of. Some of them are in three-dimensional space. Most of them are just kind of laying on the ground. And we're going to move on from here. So. First thing I want to do is I'm going to get rid of all the stuff that I don't need to do the import with. So I'm going to go to my active layers only, and I'm just going to start deleting some stuff. And this is just to make my drawing a little bit faster, a little bit easier to use. Delete some stuff here. I'm going to get rid of my dimensions. And again, this is where... Okay, so hopefully the echo is a little bit better. It seems like people are saying it is. I'll leave my positions in, get rid of focus areas, get rid of all this kind of stuff that is not really needed. Don't really need most of this set, and this right now is really just to make the drawing run a little faster. Okay. So what I did beforehand is I went in here and using my section, I measured all of my heights off of the stage floor, which is my origin point here. So I know the heights of all of these shin fixtures, my mid fixtures, my heads, all of my electrics, and I just dropped those over here into a text editor. So I have all of those dimensions ready to go. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and assign Z values to my lighting positions. So I'm going to move this over into a three-dimensional orbit a little bit just to make this a little bit easier to see. This computer does not like Vectorworks. Okay, so my first electric here, if I look at my document, that is at 28 foot 2 inches. And actually the 1A and 1B are both at 28 foot 2 inches. And I got the 28 and this is the 2. Okay, so now if we see, if we take a look at this drawing again in three-dimensional space, we can see that all of the fixtures that are on the 1A and 1B have jumped up to the right height. For the most part, yeah, it looks like pretty much everything is there. Sometimes every once in a while you'll see something that lingered behind, either because it wasn't actually attached to the lighting position, there might have been some kind of a weird typo in the position name, something like that. But looks like we're working. Okay. Second electric's at 27 foot 5. So I'm going to grab my second electric. Put that up to 27 foot 5. Wait for my computer to catch up. And again, oh, okay. It appeared to not work. Let's try it again. 27 foot 5 inches. Okay, good. That one worked. Third electric is 29 foot 11. Great. And finally, fourth electric is 21 foot 5. So excited today to hook the microphone up and get it all actually sounding better. Of course, it didn't work. I'm sure I did something wrong. Okay. So now all of my overhead electrics are up. That was probably the easiest thing of all the dimensioning we have to do. I'm going to get rid of these hazers because I don't need the hazers in my capture file. I'm going to get rid of these. I'm not going to get rid of those yet, actually. Leave those. Oh, and my apron trusses. So this is my fault for not doing this drawing properly, but the apron trusses here are actually not on a spotlight lighting position. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and grab my 6 moving lights and give them a manual Z value of 26 foot 4 inches. And I put that in the wrong box. So I just accidentally moved them way off my screen. I will undo that. Come back in here, 26 foot 4 inches. Okay. So those are in the right space. Let's figure out what is going on with this mover over here. To do that, I'm going to go to a side view. And really, I'm just going to click him, and I'm going to drag him straight down. So one thing to note about how I'm doing this is a lot of what I'm doing is not 100% precise to half inches or inches here or there. We're not trying to get a perfect previs made for this entire show. We want to get it pretty close. There's always going to be some things here and there that are adjusted in the space, and our goal is mostly to get it as functional as possible and get as much usable stuff done as possible before we get into the space. So when I say like, okay, I'm just going to drag it down, sure, that might be an inch or two off here or there, but in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter for this. Okay, so now comes the slightly harder part, and that's figuring out how we're going to stack all of our side light here that we've drawn in 2 dimensions. So I'm going to go back to just a simple plan view by hitting 0 and waiting for the computer to catch up. Okay. Now this is where that document I made earlier comes in handy. So I'm going to make this window a little smaller so I can see it. And really what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go system by system, and I'm going to assign Z values to these instruments manually. Now luckily, if we look at our section over here again, a lot of this stuff is at the same height, so this is a pretty easy drawing to do that with. For instance, all of these ladders, everything is exactly at the same height on them. And other than maybe these apron booms and some blank spaces here versus here, it's pretty much going to be the same. So if I had a more complex side light system, obviously it would take me more time, but I should be able to get this done pretty quickly. So to do this, I'm gonna start at the top here. I'm gonna go to my ladder heads, which I know are at 19 feet, and I'm gonna grab. Oops. First, I'm gonna turn on my positions so I can actually see them. Actually, I'm not gonna do that because that's more stuff that slows down my drawing right now. Okay, so I'm gonna grab all of my head fixtures. Come on. Sorry, I should have been more prepared for this. Okay, I'm going to grab all my very top fixtures here. You guys and you guys. And I'm going to give those a height, we said, of 19 foot even. Okay. Now my next section down is going to be at 16 foot 9. Okay, 16 foot 9 inches. And my lower units are going to be at 14 foot 2. And finally, I've got some R2 washes at the bottom of these ladders. And all of those R2s are at 12 foot 5 off the deck. Okay. And now all my head fixtures are also the same on all of these, so I can select those. And heads were all at 6 foot 5. 6 foot 5 inches. And now it gets a little more complicated. So I've got these downstage shins are at a different height than the upstage ones. And that's because there's a stage deck that goes in. So technically these are the same proportion off of the ground, or off of the acting ground, but our reference line, which is the ground they're different off of. Excuse me, the reference line is the stage deck, which they're different off of. So these are at 9 inches in 1. And then in 2 and 3, these are at 2 foot 7. Now I know that these are also in the same, oh no they're not. Oh, I grabbed the wrong ones on this side. I know that these are in the same kind of slots in these dance towers as the downstage ones, so I'm going to go ahead and select those mids too, because I know that that's what they're going to end up being. So this is the in-1 shin, which is, in-2 shin, which is at 2 foot 7 inches. Okay. So I've done all of those. I did these, right? Yes. Have I done these yet? I have not. So now I just need the in-2 and in-3 mids, which are at 4 foot 5 inches. Okay, so now all that is done. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do my apron dance towers really quick. And do 9 inches for the shins. And again, these heights are going to be slightly different in real life once we get in there, but for the purposes of previs, it's going to be good enough. 2 foot 7 again. Our heads are once again, oh, I forgot to list the heads on these, but because they're in the same holes as the other ones, I can just scroll down here. I know that they're at 6 foot 5. 6 foot 5 inches. Again, anybody has any questions as I'm going through this, please feel free to jump into the chat and let me know. Okay, so now we have just these side light unit, or the top of the towers left. All my bottom units, these are at 9 foot 11. My mid units are at 11 foot 9. Great. My top units, all 4 of these, are at 13 foot 6 inches. And finally, I had two leftover solo 1000s with nowhere to put them, so I'm putting them on top of these booms, and we'll see how they work out. Moving lights are at 15 feet up. Okay. So now everything's got a Z. Oh, I forgot my little apron pars here. Let me go measure those really quick. So those are these two right here. And I'm just going to quickly measure their height from their center off the deck. 6'7" is what we want. Grab all four of them. You might be asking, you know, I just zoomed out to this section. You see there's these really great ladder systems in this venue. The challenge is that you can't focus them when the pit is down because you have to drive a lift out. So we kept holding up the sound department and every other department just trying to get our lights hung and focused out on these house ladders. So on this show, we've decided to just do dance towers, kind of like a touring dance tower down in front of the plaster line instead. So hopefully that saves a little bit of time. And then these are just a Congo par system that I've got down there. So I've got Z values now in for all of these various things. And if I do a quick save here, and if I start orbiting around on this, you can see that they're all in three-dimensional space now, but it's still not super useful because they're kind of like a stadium, right? They're still in their XY coordinates where they were originally placed. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start stacking these things just by dragging them on top of one another. Okay, so I'm going to do everything, let's say, I'm going to delete some of this other background stuff that I don't need. So one thing that's also worth noting as I'm getting into this is I'm not actually importing any of the geometry of any of the lighting positions or theater or anything like that from this Vectorworks file. All I'm getting from this Vectorworks file are X, Y, and Z coordinates of each individual lighting device. And of course things like channel and unit number and color and things like that. But so it really doesn't matter what I delete from this drawing and what I don't delete, because again, I'm using it to get all of my stuff placed. So if I come in here, let me delete all this stuff too so I don't get confused. Okay, so now I pretty much only have actual lighting devices left in my side light area over here. And I know that basically everything right here stacks on top of one another. Again, this is kind of a nice situation with this particular show. This is obviously not always the case when you're working, but this show, the side light is all right on top of one another. So I'm just going to hold down Shift, and I'm going to click on the insertion point, hold down Shift, and drag that right on top. And I'm going to do that for every single fixture in this. Now I could also use my aligning tools for this, and I'll do that on the next go here. But for now, I'm just gonna doing this manually just to show you kind of how it works. So again, these are, you know, I could get a little bit more precise with this, and using the alignment tools it would. But if I come in here now to my three-dimensional space and zoom around a little bit, you'll see that all that stuff is kind of stacked pretty decently. You know, I could clean it up a little bit. Again, we're looking at this stack of fixtures here, and I'll go ahead and I'll clean it up because that's going to bug me. Whoops. Great. So I'm just going to select all of these fixtures. I'm going to go to modify align, distribute. I'm going to align them center. Let's just say on both axes here. Now I wait for my computer to catch up. And I'm just going to double check to make sure that align tool didn't do anything to their three. It didn't. So right now you can see they're all pointed straight down. That doesn't matter for us. When we get them into capture and we focus them, that problem kind of solves itself. So now I'm going to go through really quickly, and on each system I'm going to use that aligning tool. So I have some gobo designators here left over, but it doesn't matter. I can leave them all as well. Modify align, distribute. That's command equal sign for anybody who uses your keyboard shortcuts. I do typically use a lot of keyboard shortcuts, but when I'm doing these videos I try to click on everything just to make people be able to see what I'm working with here. But here's commands. Command equals, align. Good. See, now that's going to be a problem because I didn't, you'll see I had lights that are side by side and it just stacked them on top of each other. So I'm going to undo that. And these I am going to have to stack manually. So I could take these and I could go align. Sorry, that's my phone vibrating. Now I'm just going to stack these right on top. Whoops, I thought I had both of them. And again, I'm holding down Shift just to make sure that I'm moving things in a straight line. This particular case, I'm just going to line up these with the front ends of those other Legos. Now you might be watching this and thinking, why don't you just draft these positions in 3D to start with and do a 3D plot like that? And you would have an excellent point. I'll be fully honest with you, I just don't know how to do that. I have not done that yet. I'd like to start doing that. This has just kind of been the way that we've done it for such a long time. And it seems to be the way, I mean, a lot of people who have been using Vectorworks for a long time, how a lot of the electricians I work with, it's how they understand it. So it just is easier to represent this. And also, I just, up until maybe the last 2 years or so, I haven't really had a huge need to do a lot of this 3D work that we're doing. A lot of what we're doing is because of the time frames that we're working with. So I'm still getting better at these tools, still kind of mastering this workflow a bit. So maybe for the next video, by then I'll have 3D positions for all this side light ready to go. I'm sure if I was doing my rendering in Vectorworks or Vision or something like that, I would do it that way. But so a question I get a lot is why Capture? I love Capture because I think it's the best visualizer at the price point that it's at. I mean, there's some features that are definitely lacking, some things that frustrate me about it. But for the most part, for the amount of money that it costs, you get a pretty stellar product out of that. Okay, so now I've got all those. Oh, I forgot my apron ones here. Do those real quick. Boom. My goal in 2020 was to do a lot more like educational content and blog posts and things like that. And so far I've been failing pretty spectacularly at that goal, but hopefully more to come soon. Okay, let's see here. Almost there. Getting to the exciting part soon, I promise. We've got about 12 people watching right now. If you do have to go or come back or anything, this video will be up on my YouTube channel later. So don't feel like you need to stick around. Okay, and those stays like that. And now I just need to stack you and you. Here. Typically my computer's a lot faster at this. It's just running my streaming software, it's running Vectorworks, Capture, and Sketchup all in the background right now. So that's why this is taking a little bit longer than usual. Okay, so now I've got all this side light vertically stacked. And again, I'm going to go into a 3D orbit here just to be safe. Just to double check, make sure nothing got messed up. That looks pretty accurate to how it's going to look in real life. Of course, now XY wise, it's all messed up. So I'm going to fix that next. But that's pretty close. Let's go back to a plan view. I'm going to save again. I do have my autosave in Vectorworks 2020 turned on every, where is that? I have it set to every 6 actions instead of minutes now. So instead of every minute, I do operations because I've had so many crashes. So this way, the most I could ever lose is 6 operations worth of stuff, which sometimes is a lot, but so far that's been pretty good. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to group all of these various things so that I can move them around pretty quickly. So I'm going to group each one of these vertical stacks of fixtures. And right now I'm just marquee selecting them and doing Command G to group them. You can also, of course, right click and do, okay, maybe you can't. So I'm going to marquee select them and hit Command G to group them. Same thing here, group, group. Group, and group. And then just to make it a little bit nicer to look at, I'm going to do another align, but this time I'm going to only align them on this axis, so they pop into a straight line here, hopefully. And the reason I grouped them first is because if I did that with just all of the objects selected, it would align all of the objects, all of the lighting fixtures along that axis evenly. But by doing it this way, it's aligning the groups instead. And you can see that took a hot second to accomplish here. Just got to hold out for me for a few more minutes, little buddy. Okay, so we are aligned here now. One more thing before I move on, what I want to point out is an important concept for all of these various programs and all of this importing exporting is that we have a consistent origin point. And so for the most obvious example of that in the theater is the intersection of the center line and the plaster line. So if you just look at my rulers here at the top and side of my Vectorworks window, you can see that 0 is right on my center line and 0 is right on my plaster line. If for some reason yours doesn't do that, you can change that in two ways. You can do Command 9, and this will allow you to set your user origin. You can also get there under Tools, Origin, User Origin. And then the easiest way for me to do it is I hit Set User Origin to next mouse click. Then when you hit OK, you just click on that intersection point of your center line and your plaster line, and it resets all of your rulers and all of your XYZ values based on that. So when I'm giving all of these fixtures XYZ coordinates, like if I click on this fixture and look up here in the info palette, you can see it's X -3, Y 2'1", Z 29'8". That's all in reference to this down center plaster line data point. Excuse me. Capture will use that as its reference point for everything, and so will Sketchup when we go to pull everything in a second. Okay, so the next thing I want to do, let me check something. Oh, that's not what I wanted. Stand by 1 second, everybody. I'm sorry. Okay, I think I have this set properly. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to drag these groups directly on top of where they're drawn in two-dimensional space. So I've got these rigging points drawn there, which I'm going to leave, and I'm going to delete the stuff that's underneath it, because those contain some like lighting symbols, and just again, for simplicity and clarity, I'm going to get rid of that. Deleting all of this stuff. And so I know that that rigging point is basically going to be the center line for my position when I drop it in. So if you're looking at this right now, you think, oh, there's a lot of like extra information on here. This doesn't look good. It's because all of our drawings are set up using a complex series of layers and viewports. So all of this information is stacked on top of each other, but when I actually look at my sheet layers over here, that information is not always printed on every layer. So maybe that's another video one day on how to use sheet layers that way, because I know a lot of people don't do it that way. I think it's super, super valuable. Okay, I'm going to get rid of some of this other stuff that's up here that I don't need. Wow, come on, there we go. And now I'm just going to start putting these things into three-dimensional space. So I'm going to start with this guy. Again, I'm holding Shift just to constrain myself to the X and Y axis, just in case it decides if I have some kind of other snapping thing turned on or anything like that. And then I'm going to slide you over here. This is actually more close to where this position will be in real life. I need to update this drawing. So that's good there. Now before I move on, I'm going to do one more little orbit here. And what I want to make sure is that none of my lighting devices in that group have snapped themselves to an actual lighting position. Because if you notice right now, all those lights are kind of free-floating in space. They're not actually attached to a position like they were on my electrics. And that's what I was trying to check in my settings. There's a place to disable that, and maybe somebody in the comments can point it out. I've honestly forgotten where it was at this point. I thought it was in here somewhere where you can just say do not attach automatically. But I think I have that turned off. So if I figure it out, I'll put it in the video description later. So I'll move this down. Really, not a big issue on these particular positions, but I used to deal with it a lot, especially when I was dropping ladders in, because the ladders would be right underneath electrics. And so I would do all of this work, I would get all these things placed nicely, and then I would go to move them into position, and all of the fixtures from the entire ladder system would jump over onto my electric, and it was super annoying. So I'm going to move that kind of in line with this rigging beam here. Same thing there. So if you did notice when I zoomed around there, the solo theaters that were on the top of those were upside down. I'm going to fix that in Capture, because sometimes I found that doing the rotations, sometimes it transfers nicely, sometimes it doesn't. So I'm just going to leave them underhung for now, and then I'll flip them around to be top mounted once we get them in our number 1 systems here. In theory, oh no, these are not drawn accurately. In theory, these 3 things here should be in the right space when it comes to upstage, downstage coordinates, so I should be able to move all 3 of them at once. And just wait for my drawing to catch up here. Again, I'm going to put them right on top of those rigging points. And I know that my center line, or my center point of these groups is probably that little color source par that I see there. So I'm going to get these kind of shifted over to be in line with the color source. So again, right now, not super precise. The Licos, the pars don't matter as much to me. The moving lights, I will spend a little bit more time once we get them into Capture, getting them in the right exact positions. But for now, this is good enough. Come back over here to orbit again. Aha! And you look, see, it happened again. So I need to quickly figure out where that setting is, which I should have prepped in advance for all of you. You can see that all of those fixtures that I had there have now jumped up to those electric pipes, except for this one because it's not near an electric. So let me go back here, undo. This will be fun to wait for the computer. Sorry, everybody. Going to go back to before I even move them. Maybe that setting was under the individual positions. I know this is riveting television watching me do undo steps on Vectorworks 2020. One more, I think. Okay, so now they're back in the right spaces here. So let me investigate really quick and see if I can remember where this setting is. It's not there. I know. Okay. Question why I'm looking for this question was thoughts on the MA.2 for theater. I mean, I don't have any strong thoughts. I'm an EOS guy when it comes to my theater work, just because it's the way my mind works when it comes to theater playback. I've been using, I just opened the same thing twice. I've been using MA more in corporate work and other things, and I like it for that. I like it for live playback and live busking. But I still just I prefer the EOS for theater stuff. The thing is, like, if you know how to use the tool that you have, you're going to be able to accomplish the same thing. So I don't get caught up in the whole debate over what's better and what's worse. I think there's certain tools for certain tasks, and I can do anything on an EOS that a MA programmer could do on an MA. It might take me longer, it might be a different time, but it'll work out. Okay, is anybody watching right now that can help me with this? I'm looking for a setting somewhere that allows me to not snap my instruments to a lighting position. And I feel like an idiot because I can't find it. I know that Jess helped me out with this before, so let me search my iMessage really quick and see if I can find this. More questions in the meantime while I'm looking for this information. Shout them out in the comment section there. Or sorry, in the live chat. Okay, when all else fails, I will take to the Google machine and see if I can just Google this and if anything will come up. I don't think... Oh, yes, Jeff, that sounds right. Pick radius sounds right. Where do I get to that? It's under Spotlight References. Oh, Lighting device tab, enable auto positioning. See, now I thought that that's exactly where I was. Spotlight, lighting devices. Okay, so this is where I am, and this is where I thought it was supposed to be, and I'm not seeing that anywhere. Oh, God, right there. It's right there, everybody. Okay, figured it out. So it's not under lighting devices, it's under loads and rigging. Thank you, Jeff, for helping me get there. It's under pick radius here. I'm going to go ahead and do uncheck enable auto positioning when moved. So basically what that means is if I move a fixture, it's not going to snap it to the closest lighting position. I'm gonna uncheck both of them. The first one would be if I'm creating a new fixture, inserting a new fixture, having it jump into that position. Just for safety, I'm gonna get rid of both of them for now. Ooh, sorry about that, everybody. We are live. Okay, so now I'm gonna come down here, and hopefully this is gonna go a hell of a lot smoother. I got pretty damn close there on that drag, so I'm gonna leave those. These straight down on top. Okay. Just goes to show you can use this program every day and forget how to do something incredibly basic constantly. It's the story of my life. 10 years ago, I would have known that. Okay. Moving those in. We are almost done with Vectorworks. Moving those down. Okay. So now before I do any kind of exporting here, I'm going to do one more orbit to kind of look around and see if anything looks off. And so far it doesn't. I've got pretty much everything in the right three-dimensional space. And Vectorworks froze. There we go. Okay. So I've got everything in the right three-dimensional space. So I'm pretty much done with this drawing at this point. So I'm going to do another quick save. And now I'm going to export just my fixture information. So under File, Export, I'm going to come down to Instrument Data. And I'm going to just click all. You can go through and pick only the things you need, but since they're kind of scattered around throughout the list, I'm just going to click all, and then I'll pick the fields that I want in Capture later. Don't need them in Write4 format. Export field names as first record is important so you know how to match things. Export this. I'm going to put it under Gentleman's Guide, Capture. I'm going to call this the BO2 data export. BO2 is the current revision of the plot. Okay. Now we just kind of hope that Vectorworks is working in the background, maybe, I hope. Okay, I think it did it. Coming in over here, I'm going to just double check that file. So it's under Capture. Open it up, and that looks right. I believe this is a tab separated file. It looks like everything is there. So now I'm going to come in and I'm going to look at my SketchUp model. So this SketchUp model was made by Will Lowry. Basically at City Springs we get a lot of the packages that they use at City Springs are rental packages. This one is the rental package from the network's first national tour of Gentleman's Guide. So we've got a pretty full set of documents, but there's not often a 3D model built of that. So it kind of comes down to the numbers on that. It's cheaper to have somebody build a 3D model sometimes than it is for us to spend that extra overnight in the theater programming. Instead we can take this model in and get a lot of our work done in advance. So this file is super clean. Will did an excellent job with it. You can see every single object is on its own. It has its own tag. It's no longer a layer in SketchUp 2020. It has its own tag, so I can turn things on and off as needed. This comes in handy in Capture because I'm able to import all of these different layers. All of these different tags as layers within Capture, and so I can quickly manipulate and organize things. So a question just came in: what is the revision nomenclature I use? Basically. Let me go back to Vectorworks here and show it really quick. I use letters and numbers. So letters refer to a kind of a major revision. So like A is usually all of my prep documents or my roughs. B is when we're doing submittal drawings, shop prep drawings. C is when we get to load in. D is focus, and E is archive. And then within those, you can have multiple numbers. So you can see, like, we did a first draft that was our submittal copy to the company. That was BO1. Now BO2 is the shop prep draft. And every single piece of paperwork, every single page has that code on it. So it's very quickly to see to make sure that you're working from the same revision of document no matter what. It's easier than looking at a date, a timestamp. It just says, oh, BO2, I know this is right. I can use this. Moving on. Okay, so back to SketchUp for a second here. Again, this file is super clean. Only thing I want to do before I do any kind of importing is just do a quick renaming of some of these layers, some of these tags, and I'm also going to delete some of the stuff that I don't need. For instance, I don't need the stage deck. I don't need the proscenium arch in this because all of that stuff already exists in my capture file that I have of the venue. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to just delete all of this. And I'm going to delete contents. Whoops, I guess I only selected one. Delete contents. So getting rid of that stuff. Now all I really have left is the actual scenic model of the things that we're using. And just to make this a little bit simpler when we get in there, get into Capture, I'm going to add an abbreviation to the beginning of each one of these layers. So I'm just going to copy paste that. And you'll see this is important because I have within my Capture file when we get there, I have a bunch of layers already set up for things like the building architecture and lighting fixtures and lighting positions. So I want to make sure that my drawing stays organized. Oops. Oh. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. What? That, okay. I accidentally hit Control-Z instead of Control-V, and it undid all of my changes, not just one. This is like the first time I've actually used SketchUp 2020. See, it's still a trial up there. So there's some new stuff I got to figure out. Almost there. Some of this stuff I can probably combine once I get it into my capture file, but for now I'm going to leave it as separate as possible just to make sure that I can work with it quickly. Alright, finally, let's look at this untagged layer here. I don't think there's anything on that layer. I don't see anything disappearing when I turn it on and off, so I'm going to delete it. Oh, I guess you can't. Okay. Okay, so that's done. I'm going to save this file. One important thing to note when you're importing Sketchup files into Capture, typically Capture wants to be a version behind when it comes to the Sketchup you're importing. So I'm going to save this. I'm actually going to save this as a 2018 Sketchup file because my Capture version is 2019. So coming in here under Capture, we call it Glam City Springs 2018, and I'm going to add cleaned to that just so I can keep track of what I'm doing. Okay, so that's as soon as my spinning wheel goes away, I will quit SketchUp, which will give me some of my system processing back. Great. And I'm going to move back over here into my Capture space. So finally we're into Capture. You can see I've got 4 windows within Capture. This one's a live window. I've got these. I can orbit them around. And I have a base file of my theater in here. I don't have a bunch of architecture. I have a simple proscenium wall, proscenium arch, and then I've got the side walls of the theater and kind of the opening and the pit. I want as little geometry as possible in this model. You can see I actually, when we do this import, I won't even have lighting pipes in the model. The lights will all be free floating in space. And that, again, is strictly to conserve resources. I don't want to have a lot of extra stuff in my drawing that the computer has to figure out how to render when I start turning 200 lights on. Capture does a really good job when it comes to more concert-style lighting with a lot of moving lights, a lot of stuff happening like that. When you start adding a whole bunch of theatrical washes to it, it gets a little clunky. And I've got a Mac Pro that I run it on, and even then it's a little clunky at times. So I'm going to snap all of these into a couple of different things. I'm going to do Command W for wireframe, Command 1 for a top view. Over here, I'm already in wireframe, so I'm going to do this as a front view, and down here, I'm going to make this a side view or a section view. So now you can see I've got my three views of my stage. Got my catwalks in there. You see I've already got some layers in here that are labeled. I've got my architecture all in one color. I've got lighting instruments, positions. For some reason, I've got a motion control object here that I can't delete, and I can't figure out why. Maybe one day I'll be able to. But all of these things are already ready to go. You can see I already have some scenic layers in here, but because I'm going to be importing all that stuff, I'm going to go ahead and delete those because I know I'm not going to need them. And probably the same thing for lighting positions, because again, I'm not actually going to be using any of the positions pipes, so I'm going to get rid of that. So I'm ready to do my import, and God willing, it's going to work perfectly on the first try. So I saved this. I'm going to do an import model. And here, under Gentleman's Guide, Capture, I'm going to use my cleaned model, hit open, and pray that it works. Every once in a while, you'll get some texture errors and stuff like that. Typically not a big deal. You can remap textures if you need to. Wills files are usually very clean, and I don't have to worry about that. I get some SketchUp files for some previs, and the whole stage comes in as a bright red, carnival piece, and I have to go in and remap a bunch of stuff, which is annoying. Okay, so there are a few errors here. Looks like nothing that serious. Mostly, again, just texture errors, some mirrored object errors. I'm going to hit continue, and now here we go. I've got my model. For some reason, it is not on the origin. I wonder why that is. No, not super important for now. I'm going to click this little guy right here, this move, and I'm going to drag it over on top. And it doesn't matter where I release this. As soon as I release it, it's going to ask me 2 questions. If I want to place it where I dropped it, or if I want to place it at original position. So if I choose place it at original position, this is again where that XYZ centered data point comes into play. So if I hit original position, it's going to snap it to wherever it's supposed to be in the drawing. Now for some reason it's wrong, but because I know where my lines are in here, I'm just going to drag this over. I'm not going to really investigate why it was wrong. Oop, right there. Drag this down because I know that that is in line with my proscenium. And I'm going to come back over to Vectorworks just to be safe. Make sure. And I was a little bit wrong. So I am a little bit upstage. Okay. And again, I should be a little bit more precise with this, but for our purposes today, it's fine. What I'll probably end up doing once the stream is done is I will export the line set schedule from Vectorworks and pull it in here, and then kind of pull everything to make sure it's working properly from there. But right away, you can see, you know, all of these layers came in that we had set up in our Sketchup file. If I start orbiting around here, you can see all of that 3D geometry is there. It's all nested inside of the stage where we want it. And we're in pretty good shape to get started. I just remembered one thing we forgot in Vectorworks that we're going to come back to. If I switch this over to a live view, I start zooming it around, you can see like that's all in there. All the textures came in. It looks really good. I have the exposure turned way up right now so we can see this, but you know, that looks pretty close to what it's going to look like in the space. And again, because all of these things, now see, this is interesting. These didn't come in grouped. But because all of these things are layered, I can come in here and I can say, where's the other Austrian? That's interesting. Well, anyway, I can grab one of these things and I can select everything that's associated with that layer, and I can go ahead and start grouping stuff. And where that comes in handy is when I start doing motion control. So a lot of the things that all the scenery you see here, this all moves. So I can attach a motion control object to it within Capture, assign that device a DMX address, and then from the lighting console, we're able to move it on stage and off stage. Let me save this I'll show you an example of that later. You can do rotators, you can do X, you can do Y, you can do Z, you can do any combination of those three. So for instance, like these hanging lamps, I can assign a Z motion object to them, and then when I turn that DMX channel to full, they'll fly out. And so typically what Dalton and I do is we'll sit there, we'll spend half hour, 45 minutes, we'll go scene by scene, and we'll just make a separate cue list in the EOS that is just our scene changes happening. And those will get triggered from the main cue list as we write our cues. So it's a little bit of extra time, but it's almost like we're animating the scene changes. And there's been times where we're looking at it, we've realized, well, this might not work the way we're thinking it will, and things like that. So I said I realized I forgot something over in the Vectorworks file. And if you look here at this toy stage header, this whole thing is called the toy stage. This header actually has lights underneath it. And I forgot to give those Z values because they weren't turned on my screen at the time. So I'm going to go to my saved view here, my set electrics. Again, we'll wait for Vectorworks. I'm glad I didn't quit Vectorworks, or else I would have just done this part later. And now I'm just going to grab all of these fixtures that are underneath my deck here. And I can go back here, and I know that these are 15 foot... No, what, really? Yeah, 15 foot 10 from the ground. Lots of LEDs on this show. Tons and tons of LEDs. You, and you. These are a ground row that actually sits on top of that header, and that's 17 foot 4. No, not 17 foot 7, 17 foot 4. And I'll drag them down kind of roughly into where they'll sit. Again, I'll fix that better in Capture. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to re-export my instrument data again, just to be safe. Everything's still selected. Great. I'll let that work in the background while I come over here. If you notice, I've been zooming around back and forth a lot. I'm using multiple desktops, multiple spaces within my Mac to do that. Super handy. Typically, when I'm working on this, I use my external monitors. I've got two 27 inches on either side of my iMac. But because I'm using those for our streaming stuff today, it's easier just to put these all in separate spaces. So you want to be able to use that. It's super handy if you're, especially if you're only using a laptop and you want to be able to have multiple desktops. Just Google it. There's lots of information there about that. Okay, so real quick, I'm going to look and see why this layer didn't. Interesting. So all of this front Austrian, for some reason, came in on layer 0 instead of on the layer that we named it as. Select associated. What happens if I delete them? Okay, so it's just the Austrian. Or almost. Looks like some other things there. Okay, not important for now. Great, so let's go ahead and import our fixtures. This is the part that's always a little tricky. Go back to wireframe so we can save some of our rendering power. Got all 3 of our views. And you can see in here I've got catwalks and stuff. Those are just lines. You know, they're not objects with any kind of real geometry. Make this my instruments my current layer. And I'm going to go to File, Import Fixture Data. Oh, that's right. I've complained about this in the capture form, and nobody really paid attention, but I think you have to add a CSV to the end of that file. Oops. So I went back to the in Finder, I just added .csv to the end of that file, and now it's available to me as a imported format. Okay, so now this is a pretty standard import data window. So it's going to give you, in the left side here, the various columns that you want within Capture. On the right side is that very first set of data that we exported. So it's the column headers. So fixtures, instrument type, drawing name, I don't need. So a lot of these things I'm just going to click on Do Not Replace with Fixtures. Unit number is set to unit number, do not set. So this is the 3 most important things. X, Y, Z location, channel purpose, position I put under note. Right now there's no patch information in there. So just for clarity, I'm going to say do not set any of these things. Right now our electrician has not gone through and actually assigned addresses for everything. When he does that, I'll be able to do another export and then re-import this information again. I'll turn off the XYZ so nothing gets messed up, and I'll just import the other stuff. Identify by channel. I think that's all I need to do. Far up. Good, good, good. And here we go. I'm going to click import. And we wait. Okay, so the next window that pops up is basically asking me, these are fixtures that on the left column that Capture has found in my import. On the right side are fixtures that are within the library. Now, one thing I really wish you could do within Capture is to be able to set these up as favorites, because it's really frustrating to have to do this every single time you do a new import, but here we are. So, 19-degree luster. Again here, this is actually a Series 2 luster, so I need to do Series 2 luster. The other interesting thing I found in here is that, and maybe somebody can correct me here, maybe I'm doing this wrong, but the Series 2, right, there's no degrees specified within the actual fixture, so I have to go back in after the fact and change the degrees, which is super annoying. You would think, like with the older lusters here, the 26 was a separate library item, but I have not been able to find it any other way. Basically, I've got Series 2 luster, I've got Series 2 luster psych, and Series 2 luster Fresnel, and those are my options. So if anybody knows how to fix that, let me know, because it would save me a whole step afterwards. Colorsource, same thing for the Colorsource par. So you can see like it's a Colorsource par wide oval, but the only library object there is a Colorsource par, and then once I import it, I have to go back in and assign the lens to it. So again, just extra steps that are not really necessary. ETC, this is a source 4 par MFL. Same thing here, I'm going to do par, and then I have to go in and change it later, Solid Spot Pro. This is something I forgot to do that's probably going to come back to bite me in a second. But I'm just going to undo them right now. So any kind of practicals I typically don't bring in because there's no point in it. If I have maybe a chase sequence or something like that, I'll map them as light bulbs, but not super important for this. All right, so color source linear, deep blue. LED tape, again, not going to worry about slow frame theater. Source 4, LED tungsten. That's interesting that it thought that. Okay, source 4, tungsten HD. Good. This is a there's 5 source 4 10 degrees in the show that are incandescent, and a couple of source 4 pars. Everything else in this show is LED, which is pretty cool. You see source 4 10 degree. An Artiste Picasso, BMFL blade, color source par. Again, we're going to map to color source par deep blue. Series 2 luster Fresnel. And a couple more LED tungstens. Series 2 tung. Another annoying thing about Capture is a lot of keyboard shortcuts don't work. Like I can't do Control A to select all. Tungsten HD. I can't even paste using keyboard shortcuts in these boxes. That's been a problem for a long time. Okay. All right, we just went over an hour here. I was trying to keep this under an hour, but we're almost there. So, okay, so I'm going to look through this one more time. 19 luster. Again, these are going to just be set to Series 2 luster. And perhaps it would do a better job of finding them if I just changed my instrument name. But again, like I should be able, because I'm using this program so much, I should just be able to set favorites and it should be able to automatically find them for me. R2 wash, solo spot, not doing these, not doing that, not doing that. Okay, hit continue. And let's see what happened. So, it looks pretty damn close to me. If we look at all of this, big test for it is front of house area out here. These lined up perfectly with that pipe. These lined up perfectly with that pipe. Looks like my apron truss is a little farther out than it should be, but again, I can fix that later. It's supposed to be a little closer. And all this other stuff, damn, it looks pretty good. Here's one mistake we made. There's got a conductor special here we never added a Z value for. But really, it just literally sticks through the cloud, so I'm going to do that. And we'll probably delete it, because I don't need to render the conductor special in previs. Not that crazy. Just like that. So I've got all my instruments in there. And I'd say, like, this process, if I wasn't explaining it all the way through, this process takes probably about a half hour. Again, it really depends on the complexity of your show. But for the most part, it's pretty straightforward. If I go to live here, you can see I can then start grabbing some fixtures, start turning them on, start moving them around. Fun part of this too, this is the first time I've done this, so first time I've done it on this show, so I'm going to experiment a little bit and see, will these moving lights hit where I want them to hit once that curtain flies out? You know, there's all kinds of stuff like that having a tool like this is super helpful and super useful. Let me turn down some of my brightness here. You can see what I mean. So I can turn these lights, I can focus them around, I can do color with them. So right away, it looks like I'm going to be able to hit most of this toy stage from my apron truss. Those are probably going to be my workhorses for this show. And if I wanted to, I could come in here and I can start playing with other stuff. I can turn on this light, and I could focus it. And again, like right now, it doesn't have a lens associated with it, but I'll go through and do that all separately. And that's a pretty easy thing to do. That's a topic for another video. But because I've got all my channel numbers in here, I just go side by side with a channel schedule, and usually I have Katie help me and just tell her to read me the lenses. I make sure all my modes are correct. I do all that kind of stuff. I still have to go in and put in my color and my gobos and stuff like that. But for the most part, this is pretty much good to go at this point. Perhaps when I go to set this up a little bit farther, I'll do another stream, maybe next week sometime, on exactly how to do all the motion control stuff and things like that, if that's something people would be interested in. And then my goal is, like, when Dalton and Abby and I are working on this show a month from now, maybe I'll do some live stuff. We actually have a decent amount of programming time on it, so maybe I'll spend some time doing some Facebook Live or doing some Instagram Live or something like that to see how it answer questions and things like that. Well, that's that. So I'm going to hang out for a little bit longer in the live stream comment or the live chat here. If anybody has any questions, feel free to let me know. I'm also, like I said, my goal in 2020 was to do more educational stuff like this. I know this one started off a little bit rough, but hopefully somebody got something from it. If you have any ideas for other things you'd like to see or hear about, please shoot me an email. Let me know on Instagram, or shout them out in the chat here if you have any, especially if you have any questions about what we just did, because I know there's a lot of information that all just happened at once. So I'll hang out for another, let's say, 4 minutes until about 3:10 p.m. Eastern. And great. Thanks, everybody. See, there's a lot of people still here. So one of the other things that I wish Capture could do, and I think it does this, I believe, with Hog. Could be just talking out of my ass. I might be wrong about that. But I wish that there was bidirectional communication happening between the EOS and Capture. For instance, focusing this rig takes a little bit of time in Capture. I can probably do it in an hour or so, but I have to go, pretty much instrument by instrument, focus it, do shutter cuts, stuff like that. Turn it on, turn it off. It'd be a hell of a lot easier if I could, within EOS, like I could sit here, I've got an ion right over here to my right. If I could just say, can I turn this channel on, and then go from there and have it do that for me. That would be a little bit nicer. So, hey, it's me. So one of the frustrations I have with it, but again, I've gotten down to a science at this point where it's a pretty quick workflow. I don't have to do too much. So, all right. If there's no more questions, I'm going to go ahead and sign off for today. Hopefully oh, here we go. Oh, here's a bunch of questions. Okay. First question from Adam Taylor. A bit off topic. Would you use Augmented and Capture at the same time? So I have not played with Augmented yet. I have it sitting on a flash. I have 3.0 sitting on a flash drive that I need to install my Ion over there. Honestly, at this point, I just haven't had time to dive into it. I figure I'll wait for Dalton to learn it, and then I will have him teach it to me. I think that, yes, there's definitely a tool. The two programs are used for different things. So Capture is designed to do more photorealistic things to get it looking a little bit closer to what we want it to look like in real life, where, at least from my understanding so far, Augmented is more of a programming tool. I think there is a super interesting value to it. I'm very excited to see how it functions and how it works in the real world. We're not going to use it on this show. I'm hoping that maybe by the time we get to the park show in a few months or so, we might be able to give it a shot, but it really depends on how stable the software is at that point. Park show is another one. So if those of you who haven't been with me for a long time, every year my team and I do a show down in Florida. It's an outdoor production for American Stage in the Park. This year it's Footloose, which is going to be really fun. The challenge there, of course, is that it's outside. And so we have very limited programming time in the actual space, or in the field, as it would be. So we actually spend a lot of time during the day doing previs, and for that our Capture models are a little bit more specific and accurate because we want to get it as close as we can to real life. Sorry, that was rambling. But anyway, so yeah, I think there's going to be a place for both of them. They serve different purposes and different functions. And again, there's a cost barrier to Capture too. Augmented is free. You're going to be able to do all kinds of cool stuff with it. Capture does cost money. The base level, I think it's around $500 for a single universe. And then, what I've done is over the years, as projects have needed it, I've added to my license, so then I have the full version. But it's a significant outlay of cash if you want to jump into it right away, especially if you're doing theater. Like, again, before I started doing these really tight turnaround shows, I didn't really have a super big need for this. I used it to help me figure out some angles and some gobos here and there. But it wasn't really worth the investment until I started doing a lot of shows where we had very tight turnaround times. So there's that question. Another question. I see you use a lot of side light. What would you do if you had no option to rig side lights? That's an excellent question. I'm actually about to do a show in a couple months at a school where could we hang ladders? Could we do that kind of stuff? Yeah, probably. But is it worth the amount of time it would take? Probably not. So for that, I try to do as much high side stuff as I can, and I do booms. The ladders that we use at City Springs here, if you go back on my Instagram feed, you'll see some pictures of them. They're the GLP U-Torm products, which are basically modular lightweight ladder systems. So imagine just a U-shaped piece of pipe or a series of pipes, and they kind of have pins that connect them together, so you can make a stack however big you want them to be. And they're super easy to rig. We do a single motor point up, and we pipe them off to lock them, and they're done. So yeah, I'm sorry, to answer your question a little bit better, I guess I would try to get as much side light as I can with booms, maybe even with a shin fixture here or there, or of course if you've got overhead positions, use high sides, use pipe ends. Yeah. Other question: do I have file extension preferences for importing into Capture? I have always used Sketchup, and that's really just because that's what I'm most familiar with. I know Capture can do all kinds of other imports. Unfortunately, off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you what those are, so I'm sure on the Capture website that information is available. But I found SketchUp to be super simple, super easy to use, and so many of the scenic designers I'm working with are creating SketchUp models already. And so I'm able to take their stuff, and of course now some of them, not going to mention any names, their SketchUp files are a lot cleaner than other ones. But if a SketchUp file is grouped properly and is done nicely, then it's usually a couple of clicks for me to get it organized. Especially look at this one again. Like this Austrian curtain's a little messed up because for some reason it did every single pleat as its own object. But I'll be able to quickly grab all those and group them and stuff like that. And that'll be the next part of this, but that's not important for our purposes. And I'm just looking at this. It looks like all those underneath fixtures actually did come into their proper heights as well. They do seem a little bit low. Oh, look at that. So I'm glad I looked at this. So the whole set is floating a few inches above the ground. So again, I'll go through and I'll just select everything and just drag it down, but that's good to know. I'll have to investigate why that was, because I looked at the SketchUp file and it seemed like everything was on the right origins, but maybe not. Great, so any other questions before I sign off here? People are slowly trickling away. All right, I'm going to go ahead and sign off then. I'm going to quit Capture here and let my computer take a break, maybe. So again, if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out on Instagram, email, Facebook, anything. Especially if you have questions or ideas for future streams, I'd love to do more of these. I'd love to try to get to do one a week or something like that as a challenge to myself. So please reach out. Hope everybody has a great day and have fun out there.